this is, I guess, kind of specific to Missoula, but also it's across the entire country in all these cities and these municipalities where the number one, I think, issue within criminal justice reform is how many interactions people have with police and how many different laws and regulations and codes are on the books that can spur the state coming in with a police force, holding a gun to your head and making you comply. Because I'm sure you've heard this many times before, but the end of every law is a guy with a gun. I mean, there's no question about it. In Missoula, we have it's essentially a dog license that you have to get. If you own a dog within the county limits, you have to pay $120 a year to have a dog. And unfortunately, that people think, oh, okay.
This is in Montana.
Yeah, this is in Montana. You have to pay $120 a year to own a dog.
I was told that you guys had a real libertarian streak in you.
Yes. People would think so, but they say Missoula. Missoula is kind of a blue dot in the middle of red states. We're kind of like Austin, Texas. We're dubiously nicknamed the Kremlin on the Clark Fork, the People's Republic of Missoula. All accurate, of course, but you'd be surprised. There's a lot of red towns that have these similar type laws and regulations and restrictions. So we have this $120 a year dog license in Missoula, and that opens up the door for the government to, if they're knocking on your door for any reason and they hear a dog, they can look up your information and see whether or not you have a license with the county. They can fine you if you don't appear in court. If you don't pay the fine, they can jail you, they can arrest you, and you have to pay all these legal fees, various other types of issues, and this opens up the door for retaliation, for retribution. If you go against a mayor or a council member, they can use these laws against you and really just not indoctrinate you, capture you into the whole system, the revolving door of the criminal justice system. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Is it sort of like, I mean, that all sounds so ridiculous. Is this just a backdoor way of taxing people? Are they just extracting money out of people without, quote, raising taxes?
Yes, 100%. That is what they're doing. This is a sneaky way. It's a hidden tax, and there are so many in these different cities. So let me give you an example. So Missoula has a budget of about $240 million a year, and of that $240 million, only about $42 million of it comes from property taxes. So the rest of it comes from fines, fees, surcharges, permits, parking, all these various other things. And granted, we do have some enterprise funds in there, so the city now owns the water company, which they actually stole through eminent domain from the Carlyle Group back in, I believe, 2015. But all those different fees and monthly charges go into that budget of about $240 million. But it just exemplifies the fact that the government doesn't get all of its revenue from property taxes. It gets it from all kinds of different things, sneaky ways to tax people.
So what could you do at the local level when it comes to policing? Because it's in a lot of ways it's going to be just like the teachers union, where administration and all of these shiny new programs and the one thing the feds are doing that I've noticed is sending a lot of these weapons of war to local police departments, and I find that just super creepy.
Well, I'm smiling only because of the ridiculousness of this situation. So in Missoula, this was back in, I believe, early 2020. So it was right around the COVID. I believe it was right before COVID happened. There was actually a gentleman, believe it or not, who he blew the whistle on an unconstitutional drone strike program back in 2014. His name is Brandon Bryant. He spoke to the United Nations. He spoke from Fox News to MSNBC, spoke all over. He was very well decorated. He was speaking at city council meetings, and he unfortunately said some of the wrong things on his YouTube page. There were some videos that this man, he has PTSD. He's a little troubled from it, and he posted a video, which I don't agree with. Obviously, it was very incendiary, but it was nothing criminal. Mm-hmm. And he was barred from city council meetings, but then he was actually arrested by the local police department. He was thrown in jail for about, I think, a month and a half. He was held at $100,000 of bail, and I actually testified for the defense during his meeting, during his hearing, and believe it or not, they were showing images of him speaking, videos of him speaking at city council as evidence. The prosecution was showing his public speech during a public city council meeting to try and charge him with a felony of intimidating and threatening elected officials. He was actually acquitted of all charges in I think an hour from a jury of his peers. But that's how close he was. He was offered a deal. He refused the deal, which is very brave because he could have pled down to a misdemeanor, and if that was the case, he was essentially going to be fined. He wouldn't have time served. But if he was convicted by that jury, the way that they kind of boxed him in and showed him this option, he would have lost all of his veterans benefits. He would have been imprisoned, and he would have had to pay a fine up to $250,000. So that's one example of how they really that's how they really...
They use the system to intimidate people.
They use the system to intimidate people. But this is kind of the prelude to a different part of the story, where he was arrested, and then 2 days later, a cop's window was broken out of their car. And I kid you not, the entire city, I was in city council meetings at the time, it was locked down, and there were snipers on the rooftops of Missoula. There were armored vehicles. There were tanks. It looked like an actual war zone. Come to find out later that the window was not shot out. It was actually, they believe, a rock that bounced up on it, and they actually even think, because it was very cold out, that it was just the defroster that malfunctioned a little bit and broke out the window. But it just goes to show that these police forces, even in small little Missoula, Montana, 72,000 people, we had an actual army on the courthouse on top of the courthouse with sniper rifles, with night vision goggles, fully armored, the whole 9 yards.
So if you go to city council and complain about this stuff, you're going to get arrested.
Yeah, that is, and whether or not that's true in the eyes of the mayor, that is the sense that everybody had in the council meetings and in the public is, okay, if we go, there's going to be retaliation, there's going to be retribution, there's going to be somebody knocking on my door listening to hear if I have a dog that I didn't pay my license for, so they have an excuse to throw me in jail if I don't pay this $120 fine.
Yeah. Another issue that we were talking about is transportation, and